This is something that's really important for me to say. And for those of you listening, I would encourage you to share this with some people you know who are depressed. Share this episode of the podcast. Share the podcast in itself and grow the audience. Depression, again, it wants you to live in that exact moment. It doesn't want you going beyond that. But depression can be fought. Depression can be fought. Depression can be fought.
Carlton Coon Sr. has preached on every inhabited continent in the world, authored 25 books and hundreds of articles. My earliest memories of Brother Coon were during his time as the General Director of North American Missions for the United Pentecostal Church. He filled that role with excellence for 11 years. He currently serves as pastor of Calvary United Pentecostal Church in Springfield, Missouri. And today I've asked Pastor Coon to join the program to discuss his tremendous book, Light in a Dark Place, Encountering Depression. If you want to purchase a copy, I've linked the book at ryanafrench.com in this episode's notes, so click over there real quick and grab a copy. Big congratulations to J.J. Carson from Dangerfield, Texas, via Gene York's Facebook page, is receiving a copy of 10 Words by L.J. Harry, as promised last week. And this week, I'm going to give away a copy of Light in a Dark Place by Brother Coon. So be keeping an eye on ryanafrench.com and our Facebook page for more information about how you can get the book we're discussing in today's program. The subject of Light in a Dark Place is depression, which is a topic tragically underdiscussed in most Christian circles. I'm thankful our guest is helping to break down the taboo so we can give our brothers and sisters the love and support they desperately need. Quick note that you can support this program financially by going to anchor.fm/apostolic voice/support and give as little as 99 cents a month. Consider going to iTunes and giving us 5 stars. 5 stars is the only acceptable amount of stars to give, and give us a short review there. That just moves us up in the rankings so people can find us quickly in the podcast search engines. It's a wonderful way to support this program, and it doesn't cost you a penny. Hold on, we'll be right back with Carlton Coon Sr.
Yeah.
Pastor Coon, thank you so much for being here, sir, and for writing so candidly about depression.
It's great to be with you, Ryan. Thanks for the opportunity.
It was a real eye-opener for me as I read the book. I've battled the bleakness of depression myself over the years, but as I read your book, I realized that my struggles were probably more situational, combined with my personality rather than chronic depression. But I know that depression does lurk in the shadows and is capable of manifesting itself in my life, which is why I was drawn to your book in the first place. But before we jump into that, I know this isn't your latest book release. We're going back a little bit. Before we dive into a few questions about Light in a Dark Place, can you update us on your latest books and maybe give us a glimpse of the things you're working on right now?
My latest books it was written for men, Bad Decisions, The Legacy of Lot, and it's really about decision making. Interestingly enough, it has had a much broader audience than the targeted group of men, because Lot made 12 decisions that are recorded in the book of Genesis, and 11 of them were wrong.
Wow!
So he's a perfect model of what not to do. His decisions, in many ways, are huge, and we would say, well, I'd never do that. But we do those things in a smaller way, often having the same outcome as what Lot did, and his relations with his family and everything else. That has been extremely well received. It has a leader's guide for small groups as well. The second that I'll mention that's already there is the first in a series, and the series is is the KISS series. And of course, when you say the KISS acronym, most of us have heard it, keep it simple, stupid.
Right,
well, it also is keep it simple, saints.
I love that.
I have keep it simple, saints. Personal devotion is the first one, and I'm working on the second, which will be how to benefit fully from your Bible. And of course, these are not thorough examination. That was not a thorough examination. The one on personal devotion pretty much gives several models, and almost all of my stuff is practical. The other book that I am in the process of finishing, and just days away from having it to the editor and on to the printer, is a rewrite of my first book, which is The Daily Things of Christian Living. And there are 7 things that are spoken of in the New Testament that we were either told to do on a daily basis, or we see someone practicing it on a daily basis. The Bereans were daily in the Word. The book of Hebrews says, exhort one another daily while it is called today. Give us this day our daily bread. And they were daily in the temple preaching. They were daily in one accord, and so forth and so on. So the first book, written 30 years ago, this will be a 30th anniversary edition of it. It was 88 pages. This one will be 140, 150 pages. I look back at it and think how limited what I originally wrote was, but I have people tell me that of all that I've written, in spite of me looking at it, says it doesn't have a lot of substance. It's their favorite books. I had a pastor tell me just a few days ago, I read this book 3 times a year because it keeps me focused on what I need to do every day as a Christian and as a Christian leader. So,
how far away are we from being able to purchase that re-released, updated version?
It will be put on a pre-release discount by mid-September, I would say.
Oh, we're getting very close then.
Yeah, it's close. Covers already designed, and I'm right at halfway through my last read through, and then it goes to a professional editor, and she quickly gets it done, gets it back to me, and then straight on to printer. So I tell folks that my goal is to have written 1 book for every year I live. I'm a little behind, and I need to update that number on my bio because it's now 32 books.
32 books. Wow. You're so prolific, it blows my mind. I think just trying to write a blog or article at that rate is almost difficult.
Well, I enjoy writing, and of course, we're like, I'm like, most of my stuff has been like Chuck Swindoll and many of the other fellows who seem to have produced a lot of books. It's all a result of things that I've used basically teaching, preaching to the church. So there are exceptions to that where I've tried to write to assist preachers in their personal development. But for the most part, it's been things I've taught. So that helps. And for those of you who are listening who are preachers, one of the things you need to think about for both blogs, that, as Ryan said, a blog takes on a life that our spoken voice does not have. And much of what we preach, our notes, we can spend 30 minutes or an hour with and turn it into, in many instances, turn it into 3 or 4 blogs because the content's already there, at least it is in my notes. And then in many instances, those could be chapters in a book as well. So you're getting multiple use out of one work effort is kind of the approach that I take to it. So that's kind of the way it works out, at least for me. I enjoy the writing.
I wish that we could go back and have you on for every single book you've written, and we may just do that over the years. I know we'd like to have you back to talk about some of your newer books, and certainly be excited to have you back if you're willing when your re-release is put out. I've read your books over the years. I've used your books and shamelessly stolen things from them to teach, and
we all do, yeah.
I'm just admitting that right here and apologizing, I guess, to my church. But I was drawn recently. I don't know how I missed it. I try to pride myself on keeping up with books, but somehow I had missed Light in a Dark Place, and I jumped on Pentecostal Publishing House the other day, and I saw it, and I said, I've got to get that. And I read it in one setting, and I was so moved by it. You so graciously agreed to come and talk about it today. And I love the illustration that you used in the book of an elder with a hearing problem saying, when someone is blind, others are sympathetic. But if a person has a hearing problem, people are irritated. And you compared that to how many people respond negatively to people who are battling depression. Can you address the unseen nature of depression and how difficult that can be for people who are battling it and for the people around them?
Sure. Many diseases, my wife has had a little incident with cancer this year. Well, obviously that's not something that's visible, and she's doing well, and we're blessed with all of that. But
thank God.
Yeah, that's not something visible to the naked eye. But at some point, you become aware that there's a surgery, there's treatments, there are other things that are being done in this individual's life. The challenge for the depressed person is that you're off balance. You're not functioning as you should. In my struggles with major depressive disorder, there have been times when I have this thought in my mind. I'm in a conversation with you. I have this thought in my mind, and it just swirls. It just goes around, and you can't grab hold of the response. Okay, so after seconds, grab hold of the response. Okay, now you have the concept of what it is that how you want to say this, or what you want to say. Well, the second thing that then happens is the words won't come. The right words to communicate the idea that you now have firmly in your mind. Okay, so I'm in a conversation with you, and you're thinking, what's with this?
What's
guy?
wrong?
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
And so I have a number of friends who realize those times, and one in particular will say, Carlton, don't worry about it, take your time. Well, that helps in one sense, but at the same time, I'm still frustrated that I'm not normal, that I can't be as quick as I usually am with the response. So from the depressed person's vantage point, it's to realize that the people talking with you, the people in your life, don't understand what's going on with you. I was at a great meeting in the southern part of our country. Happens every year because of the times. And there was a fellow sitting on my row. This has been 20 plus years ago, I guess. And I was there and struggling. And of course, when you go to some meetings and are struggling, and it looks like everybody else is just coming back from a moonshot to tell you how wonderful life is.
Yeah, everyone else is great.
Yeah, and I wasn't great. So anyway, we have one of those services, and people are praying and ministering to others. And this guy, I knew him. He was a preacher. He was saying he's from my home community. Well, I'm sitting. I don't have the energy to go pray for anybody. But at the same time, I have some degree of an identity. I'm known by a few folks. Well, he comes over and says to me, you need to get up and go pray for somebody. That really wasn't what I needed to hear. I mean, it didn't help things.
Not
at all.
helpful
And
at all. No.
no, and so often that's what you get is there is not the understanding, and you recognize this, and there's the struggle. I had a fellow who did not know the degree that I dealt with depression far before this book was written, who told me, well, I tell you what I think about this business of depression. It's people who are just flat out lazy.
Mm.
Well, no, it's not people who are flat out lazy. Some of the most prolific writers, and Winston Churchill he called it the black dog.
Yeah, he sure did.
So, yeah, people who have accomplished, and then you have this person, they're lazy. So the depressed person recognizes that the misunderstanding is there, and that the people cannot see what you're going through. For the people who have someone in their family who is depressed, and I will write a book. I've already got the outline of it that I don't know what the title will end up being, but in my mind right now it's Pin Lights for the Dark, and it will be aimed at trying to help people or family members, friends, deal with their acquaintances who are depressed. For the person who is a family member or friend, number one is they generally lack understanding of what's going on. And secondly, since they don't understand what's going on, they don't know how to respond at all. Carlton, let's go play golf. Well, I enjoy playing golf. But when you're depressed, even the things that you enjoy the most, you don't want to do. So, no, I don't feel like going today. And so they can't comprehend that. What's wrong with them? And in many instances, we're not transparent enough. And I think at times, particularly in the world that we live in, we're not willing to identify the issue of depression, because from our perspective, to be depressed is inconsistent with what Christians are supposed to be.
We feel like maybe we're a lesser Christian.
Yeah, we're lesser Christian. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Our faith is overcoming. But my answer to that is to go back and read the Psalms and read how many of the Psalms are really an expression of David or whoever else wrote it, an expression of their melancholy.
Yes, and no doubt.
It doesn't generally end that way. I don't remember. Bill Hybels, many years ago, wrote a book, Honest to God, and he bases it on that premise that the book of Psalms, or the Psalms, which is, I guess, the way it should be said, is very honest. It's very transparent before God, and of course, he's advocating that in our prayer we be equally transparent. God knows how we feel, and sometimes in prayer you just need to tell the Lord, I'm really down. I tell him pretty often about some situation. God, I'm really mad about this or whatever.
Right.
Well, he already knows. I mean,
right.
If he is an all-knowing God, so why don't we become honest? And I think we do ourselves a favor if we can be honest with our spouse, if we can be honest with our adult children and clue them in. Through the years, I've had friends who came to know me well enough that I would write to them text message or an email and say, I'm in the swamp right now and don't see any light on the horizon. I know you can't fix it with a phone call, but pray that I can get through this pretty quick here. I don't like this. So
yeah.
So the challenge for the person who has somebody in their family or a friend who is depressed is to understand, to be patient, and not get frustrated when the person does not apply the solutions that you feel like would help them. Going on a trip's not going to heal depression.
Right.
Having a 40-day fast doesn't heal depression. Not that I've tried that one, but I have done some fasting. 7 days of going and praying for an hour at the church, very beneficial, but it doesn't heal depression. Always. I have friends who've been miraculously healed, but that's not always the case. And I'll let you move on to the next question after I say this. The other dilemma for people who, a family member or friend who is depressed or becomes depressed, is that we immediately tend to connect invisible issues with the spiritual.
Yes.
So Carlton is backsliding. He needs to go pray through. And so we spiritualize the issue. Well, it may be spiritual, or it may not. I remember Billy Cole telling of a time when he simply could not feel the presence of the Lord. And for those of you who do not know Billy Cole, there's quite a bit of his material on YouTube, and he was mightily used of God in a number of different ways. And
Great man of
it's
God.
It's worth watching the videos to learn more about the operation of the gifts of the Spirit. But he told of a time when he was depressed, and he was prone to depression. And he said he went months where he could not feel the presence of God, just nothing he did. And after some period of time, he called his friend T.F. Tenney and said, "Brother Tenney, I'm at a place in my life that I've not ever been before. It's been however many months since I felt the presence of God, and I don't know what to do. And I want you to take over the management of my life until I get to a place where I can find a sense of direction for myself from God." And for the next year, Brother Tenney did exactly that. He spoke into Brother Cole's life. I don't know if they talked every day or several times a week, but you haven't backslid. If you battle depression, it is not an indication that your relationship with God is faltering. So our relationship with God's got to be built on faith anyway. And faith is not about feelings. It's not about emotions. It's about trust.
Right.
So that has to, we have to trust. Jesus told Simon Peter, "I prayed for thee that thy faith fail not." Well, he failed in any number of ways, but every indication is that his faith never failed. So that's kind of what we have to reach for in all of this. So if you have somebody in your home who is depressed, be patient with them, be mindful of their circumstance. If you sense that they are becoming suicidal, and there's a number of indicators of whether a person is actually suicidal or just kind of talking, take action, take extreme action. Don't wait on that. It's better to be safe than sorry in that regard.
I wish so badly that someone like you would have been able to speak into my life in my younger years, because I didn't have the understanding to not isolate myself going through certain seasons of my life. I've noticed over the years that friendships, if you're not open about what you're dealing with, friends and family can take it personally, as though something is wrong with them or you have an issue with them, and you love them. You don't have a problem with your loved ones and your friends. It's not, depression is not because you somehow don't value your friends or your family. And often people take it personally. And I look back at my life, and there were seasons where if I could have just had the courage to be open about what I was experiencing, perhaps I would have minimized some of the pain that they felt during those seasons. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, very, very much so. One of the things that I pray for, and I think this fits within the framework of the operation of the gifts of the Spirit, is a greater sensitivity in the sense of the discerning of spirits, where that I can be mindful, I can be aware, and I can reach out to, I can touch, I can minister, I can attempt to serve the person who is depressed. If there's somebody that I know well, then that's one thing. Somebody that is part of a church where I'm doing ministry, that's something. If somebody that's a guest here at Calvary, then that's another component or another approach that probably needs to be taken. But the sense of alienation, and one of the things that I deal with in the book, is that in depression you you isolate yourself. And
right. It's very tempting.
now, and this is kind of crazy because I know that my being with people helps lift
Yes.
me even a bit, but I don't have the energy to want to be with people.
Right. I
If
understand.
that makes any sense.
It does.
You just.
I think many people can relate with what you're saying right now.
And so the very thing that could help us, we resist.
Mm.
And again, as you said, there are people who are our acquaintances and friends, and often it can be family too. A spouse who doesn't understand, our grown kids who may not understand. When I was writing the book, I was trying to come up with a title, and I had come to the point of light in a dark place, and I really needed to have depression somewhere in it. So I bounced out to my little group the idea of light in a dark place, overcoming depression. Well, our son here in Springfield, Chris, he wrote back to me in a few hours, and he said, well, now, Dad, I'm not being mean to you, but have you overcome depression?
Ah.
And I wrote back and said, thank you, son. I haven't overcome depression. I have
Wow.
encountered depression.
Encountered.
If families can realize that this person is going through this, and in most instances, there will be an end of it. I know people, though, and you will likely know, and your audience will know people who they get into this Pilgrim's Progress. I think he called it the swamp of despair.
Yes.
They get into this place of depression, and they build a big mansion in the swamp of despair. They make it a permanent residence. That one, particularly from a Christian perspective, that person really concerns me because they're not fighting. When I teach on this, and I do seminars, do sessions, I've actually got a women's conference coming up where they've asked me to come speak on this topic. Well, the first thing that I say in all of these is you have to fight depression.
Fight it. That's so good.
And if you don't fight it, it's going to win. I've been through it enough now that I know some techniques to fight it, and I am often sensitive to the pending darkness that's headed my direction. So I gear up for it, so to speak. And that realization, I mean, just that determination. I'm not gonna stay up all night, sleep all day, and blame it on depression. I'm not gonna be somebody who doesn't wash the dishes for 3 months and excuse it permanently because of depression. Now, those things happen with depressed people. I read of a lady, and this term I think is very fitting for many of us who are preachers and leaders. She lives in New York. She worked on Wall Street or something. But anyway, she defined herself as a high-functioning depressed person. And she described it this way: I go to work, I do my job with excellence. I come home, and every dish in the house is piled in the sink, all dirty. And now I'm using paper plates because when I get home, I don't have the energy to wash the dishes. It's all been spent. That happens. But again, the people who just kind of say this is going to be my address for the rest of my life, that's not acceptable.
You said in the book, a slow go is better than a no-go. It's better to keep going. Is that kind of what you're referring to here? You've got to fight it. You've got to keep going, even if you're moving slower.
Yeah, I think that fit. The illustration I use in the book is when one of the major hurricanes hit New Orleans, and interstates were broke up and is a mess. Well, the North American Missions director for one of the districts there taking me on a tour where we could look at some home missions churches that were going to need help. Well, the interstate was creeping. I mean, I traveled that interstate many times and whiz along at 75 miles an hour, but it's 20 and 30 miles an hour. But you got two choices. You can pull off at some exit and say, this is where we're going to stay till everything's right, or else you can continue moving forward. And for me, that was a great portrayal of the way we should respond to depression. Don't quit. Whatever is your Christian responsibility, and I think we all have a divine purpose that's planted in us. Whatever that is, don't quit that role of ministry. Don't back away from those things. Instead, you may just feel like you're trudging. Just take it forever. 2 weeks ago, I was in Alaska for a men's conference and retreat, and part of it was done up on a river, camping overnight. And Pastor Bradbury there in Bethel, Alaska, he took me to show me a former orphanage. Well, this part of Alaska is it's the tundra. Well, they had built this orphanage up on a hill, a cliff kind of above a river. But we pull our boat in and we get up on this basically cliff above it. Well, the cliff, and it's the first time I've ever seen a swamp on the top of a cliff because it was just a muddy mess.
Wow. And
I was just trudging through this stuff. And after a while, Brother Bradbury's hollering back, "Where y'all at?" Well, I'm going, but now it was a slow process. Right. We got there, looked over whatever historical artifacts there were. Just keep going, just keep doing, just keep moving forward. And to be honest, there are days when that won't be possible, but you don't let the day's difficulty be the deciding factor on what you're going to do for tomorrow.
You took the stance in Light in a Dark Place that depression is a disease, and I agree with that stance. But some people listening will likely not agree with that statement. I've even counseled people who are very likely suffering depression who won't acknowledge they have a physical malady that can be helped in some way. Can you speak to that, maybe help those doubters listening understand that depression is a disease?
The research indicates that it is a disease. Now, there are people, and you mentioned this opening up, there are people who are predisposed to melancholy.
Yes.
I'm primarily choleric, but my second tendency would be melancholy. So there are people who that is just kind of part of the way life is approached. But the science indicates you can, and this is very expensive, but there are blood tests that can be used that will determine the serotonin, the various things that help fire off the transmission of information from one brain cell to another. The science says that the lack of this particular chemical in the brain, and we need to remember the brain is a physical part of our body.
Yes.
That this is not some abstract thing. This is, you can hold a brain in your hand.
And people do forget that sometimes.
Yeah, they absolutely do. You can treat diabetes by giving a person insulin. You can also treat depression by adding these lacking things to the body. And I know there's much debate at times about use of medication. When somebody comes to me who is depressed, it is not my first recommendation that they go to a doctor and ask for medicine. 2/3 of the book, I think, are oriented to things we can do to fight depression.
Yes.
But at some juncture, a person may need to go to an MD or even a mental health specialist and say, here's my situation, and be assessed, particularly if they've tried other things. There are any number of medications out there it's all powerful stuff. So that's the reason that I wouldn't say to somebody, sure, this needs to be your first stop, is to get some pills. And of course, doctors and mental health specialists tend to, in my estimation, too easily prescribe stuff that might make us feel better. But in reality, the medication that I've used through the years does not give me an up, it gives me balance. It brings me to normality. It's not,
it's not meth like some people like to portray.
No, I don't go through life. I'm happy, and giggling down the street.
Right.
That's not the deal. It's that I can put together a coherent sentence. And in the symptoms of depression, I talk about a number of things. And the most baffling, the one that drives you crazy, is to pull up to the ATM. You pull up to the ATM and you cannot for the life of remember what your PIN number is. You use the same PIN number for the last 30 years and it's just gone. It's just, you're sitting there and you're thinking, and at times I've had to drive off. Well, the medication helps with that. It puts the proper chemicals in the brain, just as insulin is a chemical that we add.
Right. It's not adding something new to you. It's adding something that you should have in the first place that your body, for whatever reason, or your brain isn't producing as it should. Yeah. Many people seem to misunderstand that. They feel as if, if you take a medication, you're adding something, perhaps a false joy. I don't think the medications even give a sense of joy. They just give you your ability to have the feelings that you ought to have in what your current circumstances are. Yeah. And I think it gets hard, and you address this in the book. There's a difference between situational and perhaps having a major depressive disorder. And then there's the issue where you might already wrestle with a depressive disorder, and then you lose your parents or something tragic happens in your life, and it spins you into that. And sometimes people are trying to assess themselves to find out, am I depressed because of situations in life, or am I predisposed to depression, or is this something I battle anyway? Have you ever spoken to perhaps counseling an individual where they're wrestling with that? Do you have advice for how someone can get help assessing where they are with that?
I think so. The situational depression has all of the traits and characteristics of a major depressive disorder, or in many instances will have. But to discover it, to know it, something has happened. The person has lost a job. They didn't get admitted to the law school that they wanted. It's something that the death of a family member, situation. All of those are situations that you can point to and say, this happened and I'm struggling with life because this happened. Whereas a major depressive disorder does not have to be connected with life at all. Some of my greatest battles with depression came while the church I was leading was having the greatest revival, greatest ingathering of souls that we've ever had. And that's baffling because I have no reason, and and I guess this probably pushes you even deeper because I don't have anything to be depressed about. My family's well, church is growing, bills are paid, parents are doing well, everything's good, but still those traits, those characteristics of depression are very much still there. I do see that there are times when a person goes through a situation that leaves them permanently, I guess, or leaves them in a swamp of despair that under normal circumstances they should have, and I don't know that there is any such thing as normal in some of the things we're talking about, but we look at it, we think, well, now it's time to move beyond your grief. It's time to move beyond your disappointment and not getting into law school. It's time to take the next step. But it's no longer about the situation. Now it's about the feelings. Now it's about they're just down. They're just, and
maybe their identity was shaken.
And that can be the case. And I've certainly seen that happen, where it just becomes a lasting, forever part of that person's identity, and that's not healthy. We have a precious lady here in our church that Norma, my wife, and I had much influence on her. She's the age of Lane and Chris, and she's in and out of our house quite a bit. Well, married a good man. He's our first convert. So we came to Calvary, and he was my friend. Just a year and 2 months ago, he is riding his motorcycle to work, and a 18-wheeler. The driver moves over into the wrong lane, and he's instantly dead. Well, this girl has, not a girl now, this woman has every right to be depressed. She has every right to be frustrated. This guy was incredible husband to her, incredible to his stepchildren. He was just a prime guy. But she told me the other day that she was having a conversation mentally in her head as to what Dave, her deceased husband, would be saying to her right now. And he said, Dave told me it's time for you to get up and get on with it. And she laughed about it, and Dave was always very straightforward with her, as were my wife and I, and being part of her life coming up. And she said, I guess I'm going to have to get up and get on with it. And
oh, wow.
Because Dave's telling me to now. But some people don't get that. They don't. Instead, they just, again, kind of settle in there. And you see this more, I think, Ryan, with people who lose a young child, or 15-year-old in their family dies in a tragic auto accident. Y'all had some of that right after one of your camps this year.
Yes.
Those kind of things, and they're so out there. I mean, how do you prepare for any of that? You can't. There's no way to be prepared. And for many people, the shock of it does not allow them any room to come back from it. There's no path back. They're just dropped off in the middle of a swamp, I guess would be the way to describe it. And they just don't know how to come out of it. And of course, this is where I think the body of Christ has to really come alongside to help.
Absolutely.
And be there to express encouragement, to be patient, to suggest as time goes by, you need to, is it possible that you could now help someone else who is going through a similar situation?
Be a pin light. Yeah.
Yeah.
You list so many practical ways to fight back and overcome depression. As we're coming to an end here, I want to offer some hope to people. I feel very confident there are a lot of people listening intently right now, and they're looking for some hope. They're looking for some practical things they could do to help themselves. And could you just give them a few practical words and a little light of hope as we're closing out here?
Yeah. And there are ways to fight back, and that's what I've discovered. And I'll just talk about some things that I have used. And the first is physical exercise or exertion. The research has said that 30 minutes of moderate workout per day will produce the same results in a person who has a case of depression that is not extreme. It will have the exercise would have the same impact as medication. So that's the first thing.
Interesting.
Do physical stuff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be going to the gym or jogging or whatever. For me, there are times when I just need to go get outside and cut limbs out of a tree or do something that produces sweat, do something that allows me to, I don't know, bent's not the right word, but it allows me to, or forces me, maybe is a better word, to get out there and do something. And that's number one. Number two, music is a powerful therapy. There are people who actually, their specialization in mental health is music therapy. And it helps. So having positive music play and it doesn't have to be, but you don't want to be listening to blues or country music about people drowning their sorrows in their beer either. Those are not what we're talking about. It can be gospel. It can be, for me, my preferred is on Pandora, something called Dinner Jazz. Just don't have any words. It's just music. Music helps. Okay. The third thing is that when I'm battling and I've got the energy at least to do this. If I'm battling depression, I get up, I get dressed, putting on the best and nicest clothes I have got that match the occasion. Because preparing myself to present well forces me to think. And I want to come across in the right way to people. So that is a real practical thing, I guess, that I can do. The fifth, I think I've mentioned before, the fifth one that I'll mention, and then there are others in the book, but it is a great help to me to look to the past. And today we have technology that allows us the privilege to do things that we used to do. I've got, I suppose, thousands of photos and videos stored somewhere on the cloud. And I spend a few minutes watching my kids, watching my grandkids, and remembering various things that we've done together. It reminds me that life has not always been as I'm feeling it to be right now. Because that's one of the things with depression is you lose perspective.
Right.
Life's always been bad. I mean, it's and of course that's stupid, but it's just the way that your mind is working at that moment. Well,
some people describe it like being in a tunnel almost.
Yeah, and you're just oblivious. But when I look at those pictures, when I look at those videos, I am reminded that this, what I'm going through now, what I'm feeling right now, does not define my life. That there's a whole lot of other stuff that has been great and grand. The second thing that kind of fits within that same framework is for me to look at my calendar and realize that in October, I have this church growth conference in Kentucky. In November, I got this ladies event where I'm to speak on depression. In January, I have this in Illinois to do some leadership training and help a church. So when I look at the calendar, now I'm looking toward the future. The photos and videos are a look over my shoulder.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And they remind me that life has not always been as it is, right? As I'm feeling it is right now. Because it don't have to be bad. It's just the way that we're feeling.
Right.
When I look at the calendar, it puts in perspective that there's a future beyond this. Because again, depression, one of the greatest struggles with depression for somebody who has been through it before is this time I'm going to get in this. This time I'm in this and I'm never coming out. And man, Ryan, that's a tough gig. But then when you look at the calendar and you begin to think, well, our kids are coming in for such and such, and we've got this event upcoming, and we got to prepare for this, and it's Elsie's birthday party or whatever. When you begin to look at those things, you recognize that there's some really positive things lying ahead. And in the instance of the ministry events I described, I know in looking at the calendar that those are not just dates, and that I don't have this array of stuff that I just pull off the computer to use. But every single thing, every single event that I do, it's going to get individual attention. So I'm going to have to work to do this well and do it right. And I'm curious, in the operation of the gifts of the Spirit, Paul said, seek to excel to the edification of the body of Christ. And I have just applied that to almost everything that the church does and to my own work, that seek to excel. So now I have something that I'm looking toward and recognizing that I'm going to have to put some energy into this. So now, because depression wants you to live in the moment. And I know that I'm humanizing depression kind of, but it's live in this moment where this is how you feel. You have had no past. You have no future. This is today. This is where you're at, and that's not reality. And so, looking again the pictures and the videos, I find myself laughing or smiling or whatever, and then looking toward the future kind of ignites something in the sense of there are people who want something I have to offer. So everybody doesn't think I'm a loser. And
powerful. Yeah.
This is something that's really important for me to say. And for those of you listening, I would encourage you to share this with some people you know who are depressed. Share this episode of podcast. Share the podcast in itself and grow the audience. Depression, again, it wants you to live in that exact moment. It doesn't want you going beyond that. But depression can be fought.
Even if it's a battle you continue to fight, you can continue to win that fight week by week, in my experience.
Right. And I would make it more granular than that, day by day.
Day by day.
And the other thing that has helped me with depression, times of depression, is to start my day. I'm task oriented. Start my day with something that I'm going to get done that day, whether it's one task or two or three. I'm going to accomplish something. It may be as minor as sweeping off the porch, but I'm going to get something done today. I'm going to look back at this day and say, this is what I did. And just that in itself is fighting back against.
That's so powerful. Pastor Coon, where can people go to stay connected to your writings and your different articles? Is there a website that's the best one for them to get connected to you on a regular basis?
There is. Yes, sir. Thank you for asking. It's CarltonCoon.com. CarltonCoon.com. It's probably in the show notes, but or will be. But I do blogs there. Also, all of my books and everything, as well as some video work, is done there. And number of free items, some for preachers, some for just anybody that wants to visit to take and apply them.
Well, I know people are going to want to follow you if they aren't already, and I cannot stress enough how much benefit it would be to you if you've listened to this point in the podcast. You need to go purchase Light in a Dark Place. So much more information in that book than we could possibly cover in just an hour and a few minutes talking here. So go find that. All the links will be in the show notes and at ryanafrench.com. Pastor Coon, we love your ministry. I can't stress enough how much you've blessed me today and through your writings, and we appreciate you. Thank you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to talk to me here at Apostolic Voice.
Thank you for the opportunity, and for any who are battling depression, or I'm in your corner. I have people call often and try to gain some perspective on what they're going through. So I fought the beast, and I don't know that I've always won, but I know how to fight.
And fighting is the key. That's the key.
That's it.
You're an inspiration to me. You're an inspiration to us all. God bless you, sir. And we look forward to having you back on Apostolic Voice again.